books out, and he's a radio host in his own right. Real Philosophy for Real People is the book from Ignatius Press. And today we're going to talk about essentially how to do a good job of sharing the truth. How do you share the truth in a way that the other person can receive it, especially because we are asked to share the truth about Jesus. Some tips from Father McTagg about sharing the truth in a way that others can receive it. This hour, we're going to do the Church in the News, which is always a great thing to do on a Friday, in part because it brings us into contact again with our friend J.D. Flynn. J.D. Flynn, of course, we probably remember this, is the founder, one of the two founders and editor-in-chief of The Pillar. You can find it at pillarcatholic.com, a wonderful Catholic news reporting site. Formerly the Chancellor of the Archdiocese of Denver and also formerly the head of the Catholic News Agency. J.D. Flynn, thank you for being with us.
Hey, Cy, how you doing?
Very, very well. Very well. And I enjoy getting the Pillar in my inbox a couple times a week now, and I get to go check what the news is. There's a thing going on there, though. Is this going to be a pattern? Last time, Avril Lavigne. This time, the Georgia rock band REM. You've had? Wait, I got to think about who else. I think it was...
we had Jay-Z for a
while.
Jay-Z,
yeah, that was it. Jay-Z, yeah. What's this pop music? What's all these pop music references on a Catholic news website?
Well, we got to get the young people, I guess, is what it is. And they're
just trying to be cool.
Rock and roll. And that's why we have REM,
Yeah, right.
We've got to get kids.
Yeah, REM, that's not for the young kids. That's
No.
That's for people my age. But, well, welcome and thank you. I want to ask, we're going to do Church in the News. People are welcome to call with their questions about the Church in the News for JD, 888-318-7884. Something bothering you about what you've heard about the Church in the News? Maybe something you're not quite clear on? JD's got the scoop, 888-318-7884. I'm going to start with three Germans. Okay. All right. I was looking for a sign of approval from you, JD, that I could start with.
Oh, okay. Let's go for it.
First of all, German number one, Pope Benedict, recently celebrated his birthday. He's 94. You'd had a beautiful kind of collection of readings and videos from Pope Benedict. But what can you tell us about how the Pope Emeritus is doing?
Well, we also, in addition to his birthday, the Pope also celebrated just recently the anniversary of his election to the pontificate. So it was 16 years ago this year that he was elected Pope, and this month, just a few days after his birthday. So a big week for the Holy Father Emeritus. What we can say about how the Pope is doing, the Pope Emeritus is doing rather, is that we hear from people who say that, of course, he's getting older, in his 90s, and the physical toll that takes, but that his mind continues to be strong, and he continues to spend his life really in what he said he would do when he retired, which is that he wanted to spend his life mostly in prayer, and that he really does have a sort of ordo of prayer that defines his day. And then he meets with people, though not as many as he once did, and he writes a little bit, but a lot of his day, we're told, is spent in prayer.
All right. Well, then we'll go. I'm happy to hear that he is well. At 94, you would expect a bit of a slowdown, but I'm glad to hear that he's well. But my second German, and this one, Hans Kung recently died, and there was a time when you couldn't be an aware Catholic and not know the name Hans Kung, and I was surprised at how many young people had no reaction at all to the passing of Hans Kung, because they did not recall the times when his name was a giant name in Catholic circles.
Yeah. Father Kung, was God rest his soul, was a peritus, a theological expert at the Second Vatican Council, really focusing on the theology of the Church, and part of some of the theological movements that some of the other sort of great theologians of the Second Vatican Council were a part of, the sort of Res Source movement, and a return to the patristic sources of theology and of the Church's tradition. And it was after the council that, shortly after the council, of course, was the promulgation of Humana Vitae, and it was around that time, the promulgation of Humana Vitae, that Father Kung began to kind of have a much more marked split with those who he had known and worked with at the council, because he didn't accept the premises of Humana Vitae, and in fact, he said he didn't really accept the Pope's authority even to promulgate it. He began to sort of develop an ecclesiology that questioned the infallibility and primacy of the Pope, which was declared dogmatically at the First Vatican Council. And so from there, he began to develop a theology that continued to question those ideas of papal infallibility and papal primacy. And he was warned about that while enjoying a sort of very prestigious academic theological career in Europe. He was warned about his teaching by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and he didn't sort of heed the warning. And so after that, some of his works were said they couldn't be taught, and that he couldn't teach in a Catholic university or be recognized as a Catholic theologian. And from there, once that had happened, Father Kung's theological career went in a lot of different directions that were not consistent with the doctrine of the Church in various ways. And so a hugely influential theologian. In part, one of the things that's interesting about Father Kung is that he, at the time of the council, he really understood the power of both television and of the keen interest of Americans in the council. And so he spent a lot of time talking to the English language press, and so that gave him sort of a real profile as a big theologian at the council. But it was after that his theology certainly went in other directions, and it was a big split. He helped get Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI his first big job. He helped get.
Did he really? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he helped get then Father Ratzinger hired at the University of Tübingen, where he was teaching, which is this really prestigious theological faculty in Germany, because they had worked together at the council, and so he helped him get a job. But there was just a widening rift. They did have a meal together when Benedict was Pope, and said conciliatory things towards each other. But there was a lot of there had been a lot of distance by that point, to be sure.
And it's not. I mean, it seemed to me I got to hear him speak one time in Boston in the 1980s, and it seemed to me at the time that the theology that he was presenting was some kind of post-Christian kind of thing. But I'm sure it was above me in many ways, but it just struck me as kind of post-Christian. But he never left the Catholic Church.
No, he didn't, and he was ordained a priest, and his priesthood was a part of his identity. Now, he had very sort of different ideas about the relationship of the ordained priest to the sacramental priest, but no, he didn't leave the Catholic Church. He did. He sought, as he began to develop a more sort of ecumenical ecclesiology, theology of the Church. He also began to try to find where the Church could find common ground with other religions, which is a good and important project that Benedict XVI also spent a lot of time on. But Father Kung, in sort of trying to identify values that transcended religion, the danger of that is that you can sort of flatten the differences between religion, and then flatten the differences between divine revelation and other things, and that's where things can become problematic from a Catholic perspective, obviously.
It's interesting to think that Humanae Vitae was a dividing point. In many ways, it was we don't say that it split the church because you didn't get another church establishing itself as the alternate Catholic Church. But in many ways, it split the church in that people just walked away. Many people just walked away after that. And many of them maybe in a way similar to Hans Kung in the sense that they walked away from the faith as it is and kind of looked forward to a future reform.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. There's a lot of data, obviously, that says that 1968 was a time where you can see a point, a sort of inflection point in terms of just ordinary people stopping to practice the faith in various ways. And of course, there were so many other things going on, but Humanae Vitae has a big part to play in that. One of the things that I think is important about that and interesting about that is what you said. You never stop being a Catholic. So, the coolest thing about someone who's strayed far from the faith is that they're only ever one confession away from a return to God's friendship and to God's grace. And I think we can have a lot of hope in that, especially for those of us who have family members who don't practice the faith or maybe haven't for a long time. We're a part. Everyone who's baptized into the church is a part of the body of Christ, and only ever one good confession away from from returning into the fullness of the communion of the church, which thanks be to God for that.
J.D. Flynn is our guest, editor-in-chief of The Pillar, which you can find at pillarcatholic.com. One of the co-founders of The Pillar. I said 3 Germans, and I've only done 2. I have to ask you about the German Bishops' Conference, who I'm going to treat as one German, and we'll do that after the break. I do want to invite people again to call with your questions about the church and the news, 888-318-7884. But when the Wall Street Journal is reporting on my father gave me the article from the Wall Street Journal, reporting on a possible schism or schism, depending on how I get criticized or how I say it, in the church in Germany, then this is no longer just speculation at the level of those of us who make Catholic media, but it's moved into the secular media. I want to ask you about the status of the church and the possibility of a split in the church in Germany when we come back. We'll do that, JD?
That sounds great.
All right. And if you've got a question for JD, 888-318-7884.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Now, not only can you watch EWTN anywhere but anytime with EWTN On Demand. Get on-demand access to more than 12,000 EWTN programs, including live shows and specials, all in one place, all free. Just go to EWTN.com/on-demand. There's nothing to fill out, no memberships required, and no fees to pay. All you need is an internet connection, and you're good to go. EWTN On Demand. Fast, easy, and free.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. In this hour, we're doing the church in the news. If you have questions about the church in the news, Pope Francis maybe, or the financial scandals in the church, the various things we hear from the Bishops' Conference here in the United States, or if you have other questions about the church in the news, maybe about how the church is responding to certain political situations, refugee situations, the church in China. If you've got a question, it is welcome here, 888-318-7884. We've got one of the best with us to talk about it, J.D. Flynn, editor-in-chief of The Pillar, which you can find at pillarcatholic.com, which is producing very fine journalism about the Catholic Church. 888-318-7884. When we went to the break, JD, I said I was going to ask you about Germany. Your partner in journalism there came on and Focus with us and did a whole Focus episode on are the German bishops dangerous? That's what we call it. He didn't say that. We gave it its most sensational title.
Hey, you got to get a headline.
Got to get the clicks, and we did too, because Get Religion picked it up and put it on their website. So,
oh, great.
Yeah. So, but what can you just give us a review of this current situation with the bishops in Germany?
Well, the current situation with the bishops in Germany is perilous. You know, the question of are the bishops in Germany dangerous? I'm not sure it is clickbait. It's a fair question. The church in Germany has been for the past few years undertaking this process that they call a synodal way or synodal path, and it's basically a meeting of not only bishops but also a large number of lay representatives who come from the sort of large lay German organization. There's no real kind of analog for it in the U.S., but sort of this very large group that represents a lot of German Catholics and helps to sort of has a fair amount of sort of influence in the church because it helps by kind of arrangement to help distribute some of the German church's resources, money, which are vast, and so it has some influence. So anyhow, the bishops in this group are together at this process they're calling the synodal way, and it is essentially kind of It almost feels like a kind of a legislative session to sort of talk about what the future of the church should be. So they have proposals in different areas: what sexual morality in the church should look like, what whether women should be ordained priests, whether there should be a difference in whether there should be sacramental sharing, whether Protestants should receive the Eucharist, these kinds of things. And they're kind of voting on these proposals. And they put together now, they're working in committees, and they put together some of the first proposals, and they're all advancing radical changes to Catholic doctrine, which of course Catholic doctrine doesn't change, right? The Lord gave us the deposit of the faith, and it is the job of the magisterium of the church to unpack that deposit of faith and define it and tell us what it means. But doctrine itself can develop, our understanding of the deposit of faith can develop, but doctrine can't change or reverse itself. And it certainly can't do so because a bunch of Germans voted on it, right? I mean, doctrine is not voting on doctrine is not like voting for your favorite singer on American Idol or something like that. It's just not that kind of thing. But they are developing these proposals, and the proposals call for these things like the ordination of women as priests, and allowing non-Catholics to receive the Eucharist, which is contrary to the teachings of the faith, and radically changing sexual morality. And the Vatican has said, hey, knock it off, knock it off, knock it off. And the German bishops have not. So the question is, how far will the German bishops go? Will they vote all the way to affirm these things as true? And if they do, will the Holy See? How will the Holy See push back? Because it's the job of the Pope, of course, and those who support him to preserve and defend Catholic doctrine. And so we're running towards, it's kind of like two trains careening towards each other. And the question is, are the German bishops going to kind of blink first, or is the Pope going to have to be rather authoritative in his dealing with them?
Well, we got the word, and this too was widely reported in secular media, that when the Vatican made a clarification about its inability, or the Church's inability, to bless same-sex unions, right, that this was in a sense an effort to head off the German bishops, like, stop it. We're trying to make this clear so that you can't go down that road. Was that reporting correct?
Yeah, it was that this was certainly something that, our sources in the Vatican told us this was certainly something that was aimed at addressing this movement in the German synodal path to kind of normalize homosexual relationships, and then to be able for the church to bless them in some way. And so the Holy See was trying to stave off that by clarifying that it's not possible in a liturgical context to offer a marriage-like blessing to something which is very obviously not marriage, which the church says is sinful. And so there was that effort, but it's interesting because what it's provoked now is a number of priests, a growing number of priests who say that they will perform liturgical blessings for same-sex couples. And the question is, will bishops either look the other way, will bishops support them, or will bishops tell them that that's not appropriate? And thus far, unfortunately, the German bishops and bishops in other parts of sort of Europe are saying, well, it's not our place to impede that, or we would understand them to be blessing what's good while not blessing what's bad, and these kinds of things. And in a certain way, that decision about the same-sex blessing is kind of forcing the issue of where the church in Germany was going, which was a repudiation of Catholic doctrine on these issues.
Our number is 888-318-7884 if you'd like to get in on this conversation or ask your question about the church in the news, 888-318-7884. I will move off Germany after just one more question, and that is that all of this, you mentioned Hans Kung and Humanae Vitae, and you remember when Humanae Vitae was promulgated by Pope Paul VI, there were whole bishops' conferences that essentially refused it. I'm thinking particularly of the Canadian bishops who just said, nah, we're not going to do that. It seems with this new statement from the Vatican about blessing same-sex unions, we're back to that kind of response, like whole conferences in, say, Austria or Germany or maybe even in other places, basically shrugging and saying, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, at the very least saying, if push comes to shove, we're not going to do that, or we look at it in a different way. And push really hasn't come to shove, but it seems that we're getting very close. What could happen is if the Holy Father says, no, you have to enforce Catholic doctrine, or you have to rescind a teaching, or you have to sort of stop something that's happening in your diocese, and the bishops don't, well, that could occasion indeed the situation of schism. And I think we have to pray for the Holy Father because it's his job to preserve the unity of the church, and he has to be very wise, I think, in figuring out how best, when the unity of the church is straining by bishops who are saying no, we're disinclined to sort of uphold the doctrine of the church. The Holy Father must be all of the things that a father must be, which is to be both stern and winning enough to sort of maybe bring people back and to have hope in their conversion and those kinds of things. So it's not an easy thing at all to know exactly the right move here, to know what the balance is, as it isn't for any father, I think, to know what the balance is between towing the line and being merciful in order to love your children and to preserve the unity and the integrity of your family. Now, unity predicated on falsehood is no unity at all.
Right.
But the Holy Father has to make real, I think, difficult discernments about when exactly and where to kind of make clear what's expected in order to do all that he can to preserve the unity of the church while also doing this primary responsibility of his, which is to uphold Catholic doctrine. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So I'm trying to pray for the Holy Father about that.
Yeah, and we all must pray and pray and pray for the Holy Father. At the very least, that first Our Father of your daily rosary, offer it for the Holy Father. I think there might even be some sort of indulgence that comes with that. So you get a double bonus on that one.
Yeah.
888-318-7884 is the number, 888-318-7884. I'm going to go to callers, but I want to ask you about, I see a two-word Latin phrase appearing now on the pillar occasionally, and you'll have to pronounce the Latin for me as a canon lawyer. Vos estis.
Yes.
Okay. So
you're in the neighborhood.
I was in the ballpark. Okay. All right, good. So this actually seems to me good news. You're going to have to help me if whether it is or not, because the Pope, my understanding of the situation is Pope Francis issues this teaching, a motu proprio, called Vos Estis or something like that.
It's amazing to listen to Californians pronounce Latin. It's the best.
I got a little bit of Boston in there too. So yeah, right. Yeah. So dude, Vos Estis. Okay, so but what seems to be happening is you could say, well, Pope Francis, of course he says all these good things on the church's response to sexual abuse. Popes always say good things, but it seems to be there's some follow through. Like bishops are getting called on the carpet, even being asked to step down from their diocese. Am I correct in thinking Pope Francis is doing some really good work here?
Yeah, so Vos Estis Lux Mundi, which means you are the light of the world, is this set of instructions that Pope Francis promulgated in 2019, basically to give a process for investigating bishops who are accused either of misconduct or of administrative negligence, omitting or committing some sin that some act that prevents abuse or serious sexual sin from being addressed. And so that obviously came out of the McCarrick scandal, and it was the Pope said, what we have not had is a process to investigate these things, and now we do. And the process has been in place now for a couple of years, and there are things to learn about how well it's working and how well it's not working. But what we do see clearly is that bishops who are accused of misconduct of one kind or another are under investigation. And we have seen the first of those investigations in the United States, which pertain to the Bishop of Crookston, Minnesota, coming to a conclusion and the bishop being asked to resign his see. Now, the next step, I think, for the church is to decide whether or not she'll also conduct canonical trials for potential canonical crimes. But to have a mechanism for investigation is a necessary first step to that. So it is, I think, real progress in what the church promised after the McCarrick scandal, to see Vos Estis Lux Mundi being used for bishops who are accused of things. And of course, a bishop being investigated under Vos Estis, it does not indicate definitively that he's guilty, any more than anyone else sort of being investigated or you being, audited for your taxes even means that you're guilty. But it does mean that there's a process for figuring things out, when in the past, some of the things that are being investigated by Vos Estis probably would have been overlooked or not looked into at all.
It's funny to hear Colorado people pronounce Latin. 888-318-7884, our number. There are still a couple lines open if you'd like to get in and ask your question on the Church in the News for the man who organizes that news for you each week a few times at The Pillar. You can find it at pillarcatholic.com. Our guest is the editor-in-chief of pillarcatholic.com. That is J.D. Flynn. And J.D., we're going to go to Harrison, New York, listening on the new and improved Catholic Answers Live app. Jack in Harrison, New York. Go ahead with your question for J.D.
Hi. So I've seen a lot of things in the news regarding Pope Francis, that he has a painting of Jesus ministering to Judas in his office, that he hasn't come out and necessarily condemned the Pachamama movement, I think it's how it's called. There's a quote that I found that he said, there's something worse than this crisis, referring to coronavirus, the drama of wasting it, and then went on to kind of suggest we need to create a new form of some kind of global interconnection, governance of some kind, and that he distanced himself from the news release that stated, the Vatican said we cannot bless sin. He kind of distanced himself from that statement. So I'm wondering, is he leading the church in a direction that, it seems to me that I don't necessarily agree with all these things, but of course he is the Pope, and so I'm wondering, what are the boundaries of the Catholic doctrine that we have to kind of follow him into? And is it one of these things where I just have to say, well, I don't know, I'm not the Pope, and I'm going to listen to him? Or is there a time when you kind of say, well, this is getting a little out of bounds, and I'm going to speak up and say something?
Okay, Jack, thank you. JD, I hate to do this to both of you, but we're now at the got to take a break moment. So, Jack, can you just hold on a few minutes and we'll let JD address your concern?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you. Do that. Hold on. And it's Church in the News. We'll get J.D. Flynn's answer to Jack's question about Pope Francis when we come back, and many more questions as well. One line now open, 888-318-7884.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
According to divine command, we should give God worship, but how do we know if we're doing it right? Is worship a form of self-help, to make me feel better, a form of social activism, or even a commodity? Or is it something that transcends all of those? In Real Religion, How to Avoid False Faith and Worship God in Spirit and Truth, Father Jeff Kirby cuts through the misguided modern notions about God and religion and takes you back to the foundation for true worship, God's revelation about himself. From his first contact with his chosen people to the culmination of his revelation in Jesus Christ, God shows us what religion is supposed to be like and how to make the practice of it a lifelong virtue in our lives. Order your copy of Real Religion by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Life can be tough,
especially during a pandemic.
Are you tired or exhausted from the pressures of the past year?
We'll discuss that Monday on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on most of these EWTN stations.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. The Church in the News is our topic this hour. J.D. Flynn is our guest. You can find J.D.'s work at pillarcatholic.com. Jack in Harrison, New York. We got to get the question out. We didn't get to get any answer before we had to go to the break. Jack, thank you for hanging on through the break. The question essentially having to do with Pope Francis. Jack's pointing to things that he disagrees with that Pope Francis has said or done and asks basically, what's the limit on that? How much do I have to say, look, this is just a disagreement between me and the Pope, and at what point do you have to go, I need to say something about this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. The Pope is the principle of unity in the Church. He's the vicar of Christ on earth. He is he is the temporal leader of our Church. Of course, the head of our Church is Jesus Christ, and the Pope, like all of us, is called to be a servant and a disciple of Jesus Christ. But the Pope is, to be sure, the leader of our Church, and is gifted with certain charisms to be able to be led and guided by the Holy Spirit as he teaches, especially when he teaches in an official in an official way, in a definitive and official way. But the Pope is also a man, as all popes are, and I think if you look at the history of the papacy, even the most recent history of the papacy, you can see things that particular popes did well and things that particular popes weren't gifted at. So it's no sin to say, I think, this is what the Pope seems to be good at, and this is what the Pope seems not to be good at, in the same way that we can say that about previous popes. John Paul II, for example, it becomes more and more clear, not especially gifted or even especially interested in the administrative side of his job, and which how many of us are, right? None of us are. So, and it's okay, I think, to say that that led to real problems, I think, for the Church, because the Pope is a man and will do some things well and some things not well. We do owe the Pope sort of the disposition, I think, of filial piety, which means to regard the Pope as a father, because he is a father in faith for us, and that doesn't mean sort of unshaking deference. It doesn't mean that we must always agree with everything that the Pope does or say or think that it's the best thing, but it does mean, I think, that we owe the Pope the benefit of the doubt. We owe the Pope the sort of the sort of respect and regard that we owe to our temporal father, to our biological fathers, our natural fathers, and at the same time, we owe to God respect for the charism that the Lord has given to the Pope when he teaches in an authoritative and deliberative way, a magisterial way. Even there, it is reasonable for us, if we don't sort of understand what the Church is teaching, to ask, to try to get clarity. There's no tension. There should be no tension between our reason and our faith. So it's a Catholic thing. It's a virtuous thing, in fact, to want to understand and to seek to understand and to pursue understanding. But I think the key is to do that in a spirit of fraternity, in a spirit of openness, in a spirit of sonship and generosity, rather than what can happen, I think, sometimes if we're discouraged, or if we see things that we don't, that don't sit right with us, which it's okay if they don't, if there are things that don't sit right with us. But if we see things that don't sit right with us and we sort of allow that to foment into bitterness or frustration or something like that, I think that's where we get sort of off the reservation a little bit. I don't think you can still say that, but that's where we kind of get off the rails a little bit.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate that. No comment on what we get off of. Matthew in Buffalo, New York. All the lines full now, so I am going to just let people ask their question and let JD take a stab at it, and then we'll move to the next caller. But Matthew in Buffalo, New York, listening on the Station of the Cross. Very happy to have you. Go ahead with your question for JD Flynn.
Yes, I'm just wondering, if it came to pass, God forbid, that some German bishops, or many of them, had to be deposed, I'm wondering what that would mean for the Church's property holdings in Germany, because it seems that while Rome could deprive them of their spiritual authority, Rome might not be able to actually remove them from the physical cathedrals, etc.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's one that canon lawyers that I know have been sort of, as long as I've been a canon lawyer, which is, gosh, a long time now, canon lawyers have been sort of batting around that question theoretically, and then suddenly it becomes much, much, much less theoretical. And it's in Germany, and it's a particularly interesting question in Germany, because in Germany the Church is among the government's recognized religions, and is funded by taxpayers, kind of through as a pass-through. So there's a portion of your tax that goes to your sort of designated religion, and so the Church is funded through by taxpayers through this kind of government pass-through. And so, what would happen if a German bishop was in schism? Would the German government kind of recognize that he had lost his ecclesiastical office, or would you have the situation of sort of very wealthy property-holding sort of German national church in schism, and then the Pope appointing bishops to German dioceses who were kind of operating out of garages with no money or something like that? It's not exactly clear to me. I'm not sure it's exactly clear to anyone. It is certainly true that the Pope can remove a bishop from office, and that the bishop is therefore removed from office. And it seems that because the German government recognizes the authority of the church in its own internal affairs, that the German government would recognize whoever the Pope said was the bishop. But that's not been tested, right? So, or at least not been tested in sort of recent history. I'd love to talk with it actually with kind of like a German constitutional lawyer, because I'm not a German constitutional lawyer, but it is a really good, really tricky question that, please God, we won't have to find out the answer to.
Matthew, thanks very, very much for the question. It is fascinating to think that it could, such a thing, and I'm with Matthew and you, God forbid that this should ever happen, but that it could be in German civil courts that this ultimately would be decided.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not a good situation. Let's go to Brendan in Silver Spring, Maryland, listening on Catholic.com. Brendan, thanks for being with us. Go ahead with your question for J.D. Flynn.
Sure. So I was wondering, what is happening with that diocese in Nigeria that rejected their bishop? Like, did they end up in schism, or is this new diocese that the Pope set up there and assigned that bishop to replace it, or what's the situation for them there at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you kind of that's a deep track, man. So it's a great question that I didn't have right off the top of my head, but I pulled up some things about it. And what has happened is that Bishop Peter Okpali, who was rejected in the Ahira diocese in Nigeria, was basically transferred to another diocese. So the issue there is very interesting. Tribal ethnicity in certain parts of sub-Saharan Africa are still significant social stratifiers, and that's very unusual for us here in the United States. It's hard for us even to understand. But if you spend time in sub-Saharan Africa, in many countries, people can know immediately kind of what tribe a person belongs to, and that's a significant sort of a factor in social life of a culture and social stratification of a culture. And so what had happened with this bishop is that he was appointed to a diocese, but he was fundamentally kind of not from the same tribe, and there was a lot of in large part because of the civil strife in Nigeria and some of the tribal strife in Nigeria that plays into religious tensions and other things. The people didn't want this bishop who was from another tribe, and it became this long-standing standoff that began under the papacy of Pope Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis tried to resolve it in 2017, but the priests and the people still rejected the bishop, and so ultimately they made a new bishop. They gave him a new bishop, and then this Bishop Peter Okpali was just last year appointed to a new diocese. So it was a tricky situation. It points, I think, to the fascinating factors that play into a universal church, things that just are really not on the radar of American culture or Western European culture, but make a huge difference in other parts of the world. So, good question.
It gives you, Brendan, thank you so much for that question. It gives you a sense too that sometimes we like, you think of Pope Francis, he's the Pope of, I don't know, 1.25 billion Catholics, right, or something like that. There's so much stuff on his plate that we don't know about. And we go, well, if I was the Pope, I would. But you don't know. You don't know about like something like that. Unless Brendan had asked, I wouldn't know that there was a problem with bishops in Nigeria.
Right. Yeah, it's really fast. It's a really fascinating thing. That's right.
And you can see why popes, even saintly popes, would make a lot of mistakes, because they got to rely on, I don't know, the nuncio from Nigeria to tell them what's the best course of action.
That's exactly right. It's really difficult. And of course, in countries that are divided in different ways, understanding kind of how to not who to trust in the sense that some people might not be telling the truth or something like that, but even just how to understand the various kind of perspectives, right, and how they play into each other. It's extremely tricky, I think, to be the Pope of a universal church and then to have the responsibility of being the nuncio, the guy who kind of informs the Pope on that. Those things are not, as you say, not easy.
Nope. Because you're making judgments third and fourth hand, I imagine, in some cases.
Right.
Our number is 888-318-7884. J.D. Flynn is our guest. We're talking about the church in the news. Right now, the 20 Answers Summer Reading Challenge continues. You can get the whole set of 44 Catholic Answers, 20 Answers books for 70% off right now at shop.catholic.com. The reason we're calling it the Summer Reading Challenge, we figured try to read them by the end of the summer. You'll have a really complete Catholic apologetics education. 44 books. Get the whole set, 70% off right now at shop.catholic.com.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley of the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
EWTN, Teaching the Truth.
Thank you so very much, first of all, for this ministry. You have no idea what a blessing you and EWTN have been in my life and for my life, and I just thank you for that.
Well, first off, I'd like to say God bless you for your ministry, and my wife prayed daily for EWTN. It's a game changer in our world.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Certainly in recent decades, we Catholics have come to appreciate the need for good, solid reporting on the condition of the Church, what's going on within dioceses, what's going on within national conferences, and what's happening at the Vatican. Not vindictive reporting, not opinion-based reporting, but fact-based reporting. And more, we're getting that from a set of really good news sources. At the forefront of all of that is the Pillar. You can find it at pillarcatholic.com. Very fine work being done by the folks at Pillar. And the head of all that, and one of the two founders of the Pillar, is J.D. Flynn. He's our guest today. And you're welcome to call with your questions about the Church in the News, 888-318-7884. You're also welcome to go to pillarcatholic.com and find out all about it. Our next question comes from Myron in Syracuse, New York, listening on 88.7 FM. Myron, go ahead with your question for J.D.
Yes, thanks. I was wondering what the progress is on getting Biden excommunicated, because I think that, to me, that's top priority. Everything else is way number two, a distant second.
Great question. Thanks for asking. So, probably helpful to maybe define a couple of terms. Excommunication is a formal kind of penalty in the Church's canon law that has with it certain consequences. An excommunicated person can't receive the sacraments except for the sacrament of penance. An excommunicated person can't hold a position in the Church, which is called an ecclesiastical office. An excommunicated person can't have an ecclesiastical funeral. There are other things too, but excommunication is a certain kind of penalty in the Church, and it is incurred or is declared if a person commits a certain number, a certain defined canonical crime. So a person, in order to be excommunicated, a person must do one of the things which the Church's canon law says leads to or could lead to excommunication. One of those things is procuring an abortion. So a person who procures an abortion, a Catholic who procures an abortion, who meets certain other qualifications as well, who is acting in freedom, who is above the age of 16, who is aware that there's a Church prohibition against the procuration of an abortion, can incur by that abortion an excommunication. And that includes, in the Church's law, not only a person who has an abortion, but a person who pays for an abortion, a particular abortion, a direct abortion, a doctor who performs an abortion, or another medical professional who's engaged in the performance of an abortion. That's how the Church defines a person who might be excommunicated as something related to abortion. For politicians who support legal protection for abortion or legal funding for abortion, or laws which would allow for those things, such as President Biden, the Church does not say, the Church's canon law does not say that they sort of fit into the category of procuring an abortion. But what the Church does say is that a pro-choice politician who advocates for legal protection of abortion or federal funding of abortion or something like that should not be admitted to Holy Communion. That they should be warned by their bishop to stop doing that, to knock it off. And if they don't knock it off, then they should not be admitted to Holy Communion. That if they're obstinate, the Church says, if they're obstinately persevering in that manifest grave sin of advocating for pro-abortion policies, then they should be prohibited from Holy Communion. Now, who that's up to is Biden's bishop. So that means the Archbishop of Washington or the Bishop of Wilmington, Delaware, or if Biden's in another place, the bishop of the local place. And to date, those bishops have said that that's not their intention. What's happening right now, though, is that the U.S. Bishops' Conference is drafting a document on what they're calling Eucharistic coherence, which is, I think, their kind of euphemism, their term for this whole set of questions. And that document is expected to sort of draw from the recent teachings and magisterium of the church on precisely these issues, and the expectation of a lot of people is that document, or at least the initial draft of that document, will pretty strongly say that a person advocating for abortion or for other sins against human life in a political context should not receive Holy Communion and should not be admitted to Holy Communion. But the question is whether the U.S. bishops will pass it, whether it will get the support or not. And my expectation is that they're going to start with a strong document and it may kind of be whittled down a little bit. But even with that document, at the end of the day, it's up to the bishop of the place where the person is. So in the case of the president, it's up to the Archbishop of Washington or the Bishop of Wilmington or the bishop in another place where the president is to decide whether he would apply the church's law with regard to prohibition of Holy Communion or not.
Myron, I want to see if that one satisfied you. Does that make sense?
Well, of course it makes sense in a way. It has a legal tenor to it, which I kind of halfway sort of appreciate. But Biden is a pathological sinner. He's not screwing up every now and then. 1st, 2nd, or 3rd John deals with the issue of pathological, like almost a sociopathic sin, which this guy is totally engaged in. And for that reason, he should just be, whoever does it, bishop, cardinal, or pope, he should be dealt with on that level. Just so, you are not arresting your behavior at all. In fact, you're always throwing logs on the fire of this mortal sin, and that mortal is the best word for what he's doing. I don't understand how he ever gets communion.
Okay, okay, go ahead, JD.
No, I would just say, St. Paul says indeed that if we eat and drink the Eucharist unworthily, we eat and drink our own condemnation. Scripture is abundantly clear about that, and the teachings of the church are clear about that too. Now, there is kind of a legal sort of a canonical framework that has been built up around that, and I talk about it in that way because I'm a canon lawyer. But to be sure, Scripture is clear about that. The question, I think, is the question of whether or not the bishops who are charged with sort of the spiritual discipline of their dioceses perceive things to be that way and whether they'll act on it. And in this country, the truth is that in this country, bishops have been extremely reticent and hesitant to act in a public way about those things. I've wondered long whether we'll see bishops start to sort of do so more fervently, more openly, more frequently on any number of issues. But the truth is, in this country, bishops have just not taken up that mantle for whatever reason.
Thanks, Myron. Thanks very, very much for that question. Appreciate it. I'm going to go now to Mary Alice in Columbus, Ohio, listening on 820 AM in Columbus, Ohio, where my good friend Bernadette runs the show over there, Dan over there. I'm just showing off to show that I know the folks in Columbus, Ohio. Go ahead, Mary Alice.
Thank you. I do know that the church has lived through a schism, the Great Schism, what was it, 11th or 12th century. If there were, and I hope there would not be, God forbid that there would be another schism, my thinking is to stay with Holy Mother the Church.
Oh, I like your thinking, Mary Alice.
What would you advise?
Mm-hmm.
What would you advise?
Yeah, okay, hang on, go ahead. What would you advise, JD?
I guess first thing, Mary Alice, is pray, right? Pray for the unity of the church. Pray for the conversion of souls that impact the unity of the church. Beyond that, we have an obligation the church says, to maintain communion with the Pope and the bishops who are in communion with him. So that means that if the Pope were to declare that a bishop were not in communion with him, then that bishop would lose his leadership position in the church, and our obligation would be to kind of retain our communion, our unity, our obedience to the Pope and the bishops who are indeed in communion with him.
And it's
pray.
Yeah,
real thing.
But I'm thinking of St. Vincent and St. Catherine of Siena with the Western Schism. One saint thought one guy was the Pope, and the other saint thought the other guy was the Pope. Even the saints can't figure it out sometimes. You just got to stay faithful to Jesus and do the best you can.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I'm told I got to let you go, JD, and that's I want to say thanks for you coming on and tell people where they can get the Pillar before you got to go.
Sure, they can. Thanks, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me. They can, of course, you can check us out at pillarcatholic.com. You can follow us on Facebook at The Pillar or on Twitter at Catholic Pillar, and you can get our podcast, The Pillar Podcast, wherever fine podcasts such as the Catholic Answers podcast can be found. And Sai, I think I do have time. I could take one more question if you want. It's
okay. All right. I gotta say, I just messed up. I said Columbus, Ohio, but Bernadette is at 12:60 a.m. In Cleveland, Ohio, and I was just speaking with her today. I got a brain cramp there. I apologize, Bernadette, and to everyone in Columbus, and I'm so ashamed right now. Mike in Mississippi, listening on the Almighty 690. You're next. Go ahead with your question for JD.
I was wondering if you could read the statement by Archbishop Gomez recently issued regarding the George Floyd verdict and related matters. I think it came out today or yesterday.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll read the first paragraph and we'll let JD comment on it. But the killing of George Floyd, this is from Archbishop Gomez, the president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. The killing of George Floyd was senseless and brutal, a sin that cries out to heaven for justice. How is it possible that in America a black man's life can be taken from him while calls for help are not answered and his killing is recorded as it happens? That's the first paragraph. And you wanted, did you want JD to comment on the what was in the release?
How long is the document?
Oh, it's
quite long. It's quite long. In fact, I think the one you read was the statement that Archbishop Gomez put out last summer.
I read the wrong one. Oh man, I'm having a heck of an hour. JD, I'm sorry. Why don't you just respond, JD?
Sure. The one that the USCCB put out this week comes actually from the chairman of the Committee Against Racism and the chairman of the Committee on sort of Domestic Justice and Domestic Policy. And that statement is quite long, but what it talks about is the need, the bishops say, to see the sacredness in all people, but especially those who have been historically oppressed. Whatever the stage of human life, the bishops say it not only matters, it is sacred. The bishops say that the church is committed to changing hearts and minds and moving the conversation about race in this country beyond accusations and incrimination towards practical, nonviolent solutions to the everyday problems that are encountered in these communities. Let us pray through the revelation of so much pain and sadness that God strengthens us to cleanse our land of the evil of racism, which also manifests in ways that are hardly ever spoken. That's some of the statement, which again is quite lengthy, but that was indeed some of it.
Okay, Mike?
Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much. It was one of those things we don't actually, because of the nature of apologetics, there's really not much when on an apologetics program like us. We're not a news program. There's not that much opportunity to do something that I suppose we would like to do, which is say something against racism and how clearly the gospel and everything about God's revelation in the scripture, in Jesus, and in his church is opposed to its very depth to racism. But there's not that many people who call up and go, hey, I don't agree with the church's teaching on racism. So we just don't get to do it that often, JD.
Right. Well, yeah, I think I'm glad that we have this opportunity. I think it is important indeed. You know, racism is one of those things that maybe we don't, all of us think about every day, but indeed can impact our perspectives and the perspectives of those around us and those kinds of things. So it's something I think to pray for God to give us holiness and sanctification of our perspectives and the perspectives of our society against racism, to be sure.
Again, Mike, thank you for the question. JD, I'm going to say thank you to you again because you said you'd do one more question and you did it. And then I added some editorial stuff, so I got to let you go. Peace, brother.
Thank you, my friend. All right.
888-318-7884 is our number here. JD Flynn, the editor-in-chief of The Pillar, among the news services that are just doing a great job. You know, when people ask about recommendations for where to get good Catholic news, you know, the National Catholic Register keeps producing great Catholic news. EWTN in its various iterations continues to do great work. And JD is producing a very, very fine Catholic news reporting. And I have to say, in my own estimation, what we need more than anything is clear reporting. We just... I'll just put it on the line. I think that most of the secular news media is just consumed with opinion news, and it's very hard to get facts. If you watch a cable news program or even if you read a newspaper these days, there's so much opinion and advocacy. And I'm going to be frank, I think that has poisoned a great deal of the efforts in Catholic media to get the word out, because you know where to go for which opinions in which news media. You know what you're going to get when you go to the National Catholic Reporter. You know that you're going to get the exact opposite thing when you go to the Church Militant, and that's not news. What we need is reporting. That's what they're doing over at the National Catholic Register. That's what they're doing at EWTN, and that is what JD and the folks at the Pillar Catholic are doing all the time. Our number, 888-318-7884. And the next hour, we're going to talk with the very popular Father McTagg. Very popular. He was well received last time, and it'll be a nice to finish off the work week here with Father McTagg. We're talking about presenting the truth in a way that makes it possible for the other person to hear the truth, which is something we would like to do very, very much, because the truth ain't a thing. It's a person. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and we want to present him in a way that other people can receive him. We'll have Father McTagg and take your calls at 888-318-7884 right after this. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and as promised, Father Robert McTeigue is our guest this hour. 888-318-7884 is the number to call if you'd like to get in on the conversation. 888-318-7884. We're going to talk this hour about sharing the truth effectively, how to be effective in sharing the truth. Your calls are welcome. 888-318-7884. Father McTeigue is a member of the Maryland province of the Society of Jesus. He's lectured worldwide on philosophy and theology. He hosts and produces his radio show, The Catholic Current, on the Station of the Cross, and his most recent book, it's out now from Ignatius Press, Real Philosophy for Real People, Tools for Truthful Living. Father Robert McTeigue, thank you for being with us.
So glad to be able to help you with your good work today. Thank you.
I have to say, you're prolific, so I hope I'm correct that Real Philosophy for Real People is the most recent book.
That's correct. I have finished another one that I hope to send to the publisher by the end of the month, and I've started one after that, too. I like to keep busy.
Again, our number 888-318-7884. So there are many who will say, just throw the truth out there. It'll do the work. You just got to say the truth. Is that a correct way to think about this?
No. No, the short answer is no. This is a subspecies of what I call the rationalist fallacy. The rationalist fallacy says, if I only explain to people clearly enough, they'll understand and then agree with me and act accordingly. But that's a trail of tears because we're not computers. We don't just do a series of mathematical deductions. We have a will that has to be engaged. We have emotions. We have a body. So most amateur evangelists, most amateur speakers make this mistake. They start with, what do I want to say? That's actually the last question. You start with, who is my audience? What can they hear? What can they understand? What can they remember? And if you're really good, you'll ask, what do they need? That shapes a very small space, and then you have to fit your message into that small space. Dropping the truth on people like a ton of bricks doesn't make any sense. I mean, if I ran around in southern China where I don't speak Cantonese and just read John 3:16 out loud in English and nobody responded, I told them the truth, but yeah, not so much, not really.
Right. I think the question becomes urgent for many of us Catholic parents today when our children reach late teens and early adulthood, because you realize you had their attention for a moment, but other things have caught their attention now, and a lot of the things are not good that catch their attention. So
that's certainly true.
So help us with the parent sharing the truth today, especially in a world that does not love the truth.
Well, it's never too soon to start. Okay. That's very, very important. You really have to start from the beginning. The idea of, hey, I'm going to outsource the catechesis of my children to the professionals. I'm going to outsource the socialization, education of my children to the professionals. And then we're about to leave the house when they reach the age of majority, and I see some concerns. Then I'm going to intervene with, because I said so. That's not going to work. You have to lead by example, and you have to show them how to inquire truthfully, and you have to be their guide from the beginning, especially with their moral imagination. Everyone should run out after they read my book, of course, and get John Senior's book called The Death of Christian Culture, because in the back is a list of 1,500 books you can read with your children between the ages of 5 and 18. If you do something like that, even half of those books, their moral imagination, the seedbed of their heart ready to cultivate virtue, that'll all be in place, and their nonsense detector will be very well honed. Whereas if you're on the peripheral of their lives and their electronic devices and their contemporaries are the center of their lives, you're going to have a terrible battle for the souls of your children.
888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We're talking about sharing the truth effectively with Father Robert McTeigue. Father, those 1,500 books, I'm guessing a great number of them would be storybooks, and I'm thinking about even our Lord, and this is something I think we often forget about him. He's a big storyteller. He tells loads of stories. So what's the role of stories in sharing the truth effectively?
Well, especially with younger children, they can't possibly deal with abstraction. You don't want to say, there was once a bovine quadruped. that doesn't commute. But if you talk about Elsie the brown-eyed cow, the senses of their imagination can compose that together. Children like to anthropomorphize everything. And they don't have the ability to draw deductions, but they can begin to make inferences from stories. So the first several years, you want to give them stories of great heroes. You want to spark their imagination, let them know that they can be a hero too. Very often when I'm preaching, people, look, when you go to St. Typical's Parish or Our Lady Help of Suburbia, the people are ready to check out. All right, we got to suck up 10 to 15 minutes until we get in line for our slice of the liturgical birthday cake. Well, hell no. I'm not going to put up with that. So you got to engage them immediately and say, do you want to hear a story? Well, that's different. And then you begin to draw them in. And once you draw them in, you can take them where you want to go.
888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We're talking about sharing the truth effectively. There's also a problem, Father, about sharing the truth effectively today, in that there are certain, it's almost as if there's like certain signs you have to give, like I'm the right kind of person for you to listen to. So like, I don't know that there are that many people who are truly, really concerned. I don't want this to come off in a mean way, but really, this is a major issue to them, the transgender issue. But many people will talk about the transgender issues and tweet about it and do all that because you're supposed to give the right signal. And you're supposed to signal, I'm that kind of person. How do we break through that? Because the minute I say, I don't think that that's right, I gave the wrong signal and boom, everything's closed down.
Right. Okay. Well, here's what you do. Everyone has some non-negotiable issue. Even the most complete relativist has one thing that they're going to hold on to. And what you need to do is relate whatever the hot issue, whether transgenderism, somebody else's lives matter, spelling reform, whatever it is, and say, hey, that's not in harmony with your non-negotiable issue. What are you going to do with that?
Okay. So
you have to provoke a crisis and say, hey, I think that thing you value, I think you need to look at it. I think you're putting it in danger. Can I help you with that?
Wow, because that is certainly the case with people who will be all about liberation and human rights and all of that, but are pro-abortion people. That's not a hard one to go, wait a second, what about the rights of this person?
Right. They're rallying, my body, my choice, but we should have men with badges and guns hold you down and stick a needle in your arm because science. It's really hard to be a consistent relativist, and so a very useful strategy. Just everyone has a non-negotiable issue. Find that, zero in, and say all these other things you're espousing, they put your primary value in danger. You want some help with that? So you're being solicitous rather than saying, the mouth on you, you kiss your mother with that mouth? Oh, my God. Because that just gets them defensive, and that doesn't help.
Right. There's almost a kind of automatic defensiveness in that we're so divided up into camps that I didn't do anything yet. I haven't said a word to you, but you're already defensive. You're on the prowl waiting to see whose team I'm on.
Right, that's exactly. And we are so bombarded with information and images these days. It's too much for any ordinary human being. So you try to find reasons to filter things out. So, hey, Father McTagg has some hesitations about the COVID vaccine. He must be an anti-vaxxer. Out. And I'd say, no, when I did third world missionary work, I went to a travel clinic. I got 17 inoculations. Don't tell me I'm an anti-vaxxer. So you have to make sure that you don't give them excuses to dismiss you immediately. And they're going to be more inclined to listen to you if you can convince them that you're appealing not just to get their attention, but you're appealing to their interest. That's the way to go for it. Always in service of the truth, of course.
Right. But as you said, it's not enough just to tell the truth. You do have to be strategic in how you tell the truth, because people are worth it. People are worth taking the time to find a way to share it effectively.
Yes. Yes. Charles Spurgeon said, if people are determined to go to hell, let them leap over us while we have our arms wrapped around their knees. Let no one go to hell unwarned and unprayed for.
Yeah, amen.
And I think that's why you and I do what we do. I mean, I'm a very private person and an introvert. I don't want to do this, but for the sake of the gospel, I do it because that's even more important than my personal preferences.
888-318-7884. We're talking about sharing the truth effectively this hour. The truth is, I am a shameless publicity seeker, Father. So I'm glad to hear. But I have to share the truth effectively with you. A shameless publicity seeker.
Okay.
888-318-7884. The number. We have to take a quick break before we do that. Though I want to talk to you about a free book. We're going to take a free break and take a quick book. It's a free book while we take this break, and you can get it on the break if you want. Just go to shop.catholic.com. A walk through the Bible in its ebook format is free right now at shop.catholic.com. The Bible's worth walking through. You can get a walk through the Bible free right now in ebook form at shop.catholic.com.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
I think if you pray and you say to the Lord, Lord, I don't understand, thy will be done. That's a prayer of faith. If something wonderful happens and I say, thank you, Lord, that's a prayer of thanksgiving. If you're distressed and you say, Lord, help me, I can't do anything about this, that's a prayer of hope. And you say, Lord, I can't take one more thing. That's a prayer of desperation. If you're talking to him about it, that's prayer.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Father Robert McTeigue, our guest. His most recent book, Real Philosophy for Real People, Tools for Truthful Living. The Catholic Current is his program on the Station of the Cross. Father, you just telling me at the break, very good news. Also on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Both networks, we're very grateful they carry this program, and I'm glad that your horizons are expanding.
Thanks be to God. We want to make Christ known and loved, and right now we need as many megaphones as possible. So I'm very grateful.
Boy, do we. 888-318-7884. We're talking about sharing the truth effectively. 888-318-7884 is our number. I have to say I have almost stopped posting anything on social media because I realize I am ineffective there. And I think there are people who are effective there. I'm not saying that it's a medium that you can't be effective in, but I get snippy on there, and so I decided to knock it off. You got any tips for social media sharing of the truth?
The Catholic Current and the Station of the Cross, they have social media accounts. I don't have the passwords, so that makes it. My good friend, colleague, engineer, associate producer, Matt Maloney, I'll send it to him and I'll say, hey, Matt, what do you think? So that's a big part of it. Remember, we're here to win souls, not arguments.
Right.
And being snippy, because we at the Catholic Current, we talk about the fullness of truth with clarity and charity. And sometimes while I'm interviewing someone, I get text messages from friends that say, more clarity, less charity. I don't know if that's not our business model. You have to think about how it's heard and how it's going to be remembered. And the persuasion, the etymology of persuasion is persuasio, by means of sweetness. And sometimes you do have, if someone is really recalcitrant and they're being vicious and they're slandering the church, then you need to step up and put the smack down for other people to see that, hey, you can't diss the bride of my king. this is not okay. I'm going to stand up to you for that. But otherwise, to draw people in. I mean, most people, I think, resist the gospel out of ignorance rather than malice. There are some. There are people who think they really understand the church, and they don't. I mean, there are people who think that, oh my goodness, Jesuits, well, we know what they're like.
Right.
So, yeah, and you have to break through that. So it takes a whole lot of patience. One way to get patience, something that worked for me, spend 20 plus years grading undergraduate essays. You learn a lot about patience that way.
I imagine
you learn a lot
do.
about, I'm going to put the red pen down and go for a walk around the block. So I've learned that the hard way, yeah.
Yeah, but the truth is that there are many people who are significantly now ignorant of Jesus and the church because the society is so secular that there are children coming up who they didn't get any Sunday school, any church. Right. The parents didn't believe. They really are, and I know some people think of ignorant as a pejorative word. I don't mean it in a pejorative sense. I just mean they don't know anything about it.
Right. If you don't want to use the word ignorant, you could use the word nescient. And since they haven't studied Latin, they can't get offended by it. Look, for those people, you just say, are you happy? Do you sleep okay at night? Do you have regrets? Hey, Grandma just died. I'm really sorry. What does that mean to you? Everyone has a common frame of reference for pain. Everyone has the experience of pain, loss, regret, shame. And then the world, the flesh, and the devil run at you with all these ways of medicating the pain maladaptively. I say, come here, let me tell you a story. There's another way.
Right. There is. Let me show you a more excellent way. That there's a.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a. And this is something I think, Father, too, that the modern society, you can even almost break through to people to say, is the society giving you what it promises? Are you getting what you're promised from your Netflix subscription or from your, from whatever you're getting? Because I do think there's all these big promises of liberation and satisfaction and your best life and all of these big promises, none of which are actually met by this society.
Right. And then you need the update and the upgrade.
Right.
And, oh my goodness, you have an iPhone 10? Gosh, I'm sorry about that. It's like having a birthmark on the tip of your nose. What a tragic thing. Isn't it awful to be you? I get a seminar once on morality, and I said, I want you to close your eyes for a minute. Think of all your promiscuous friends who live wild weekends. How many of them are peaceful and happy?
Yeah.
How many of them are ready for really joyful marriage? And then their eyes open wide. I said, okay then, now let me tell you a story. So identifying that very common human experience. I mean, the rallying cry of the classical Jesuit missionary was enter through their door, lead them through yours. Sadly, for a lot of different reasons, a lot of people who are in evangelization or catechesis think they're profound when they say, we have to meet people where they're at, as if we're going to find them somewhere else. And then they meet them where they're at. And then, well, where else were you thinking of looking besides where they're at?
It's hard to meet people where they're not at.
This is kind of like invert hide and seek. So let's not do that. But once you find them and meet them where they're at, where are you going to lead them?
Right.
Not just entertain them or beguile them or sell them things. Where are you going to lead them? Are you introducing them to Christ or not? And you know what? If you don't know Christ, you can't lead them. You can't lead people to Him.
A hard lesson learned in my own life, Father, but truer words never spoken. You need Him first before you try to fix anything.
And you can't give it enough.
Yeah, anonymous caller. We're talking with Father Robert McTague about sharing the truth effectively. If you have situations in your own life where you need help sharing the truth effectively, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Anonymous, go ahead, please, with your question for Father McTague.
Father, my daughter is 33. She has been a lesbian for about 6 years, off and on. And she comes over 4 weeks ago and says to me, Mom, what do you think about transgender? And I told her what I thought about it, calmly and lovingly. And she says, well, I want to become a man and have an operation. So I didn't know what to say to her. All I said was, well, you know I love you unconditionally.
Right.
But you can't do that because I know I've read about it before, Father. And I said, well, what do you know, Mom? And I said, well, I know that there's a high percentage that commit suicide. I also know there's a high percentage that wish they hadn't done it, and they're very lonely people.
Right.
And that's all I could think to say. And I said, Jesus loves you so much, Mary. You were named after Blessed Mother.
Right.
So,
Father?
I don't know. What else can I say, Father?
Right. Well, it's good that you affirm unconditional love, and props to you that you said, and you know what? There are some lines you can't cross. Okay. I recommend to you an organization called Courage International that helps people who experience same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria, and also helps the family and friends of people who are in those difficult situations. Your daughter is obviously in very great pain and honestly confused. As a result, she wants the pain to stop. That's the natural thing. We want the pain to stop. There doesn't seem to be a lot of obvious ways. And so now there's this new thing that supposedly will fix everything that is glamorized, and I mean glamorized, in social media. But then, you start reading the stories of what actually takes place in the surgeries, what happens with the hormone treatments. And I've been to hell and back. I've been in third world missions. I've been a chaplain at a level 1 trauma center. I've taught medical ethics for over 20 years. I'm not squeamish. And just reading a description of the after effects of the hormone and the surgery made me want to pull the covers over my head and not get out of bed for 3 days. So she needs help with her pain. She needs help with her confusion. And then she needs to have an extremely realistic, sober account of what she's actually signing up for. And then she needs unconditional love, but also unwavering clarity. This is not what healthy, happy people do.
Anonymous, what do you think?
She isn't normal, Father. My husband left me after 23 years. She was 10 years old. I had to raise 4 preteen and teenagers alone. And I blame myself for some of this, but my heart just breaks. I know what you're saying, and I have heard of Encourage, and
right.
I'm going to call them. And
yes,
so,
absolutely.
My heart was just broken, though. And then, Father, she said, well, if you don't agree with me, then you can't be part of my life anymore, and you can't see your grandson. She has a 3-year-old.
Well, that's her choice, not yours. And okay, I just say, honey, do whatever is best for your son. See what I said about earlier about you got to find the non-negotiable good and relate to it?
Yes.
Just say, hey, if you think that your son is better off not being around his grandmother, then you go ahead. Do what's best for your son.
Anonymous, many praying for you, and also I have to assure you, and this is I'm maybe not a happy assurance, but so many other parents experiencing similar or very similar situations. So much need for prayer there. Do look up Encourage and give them a call. CourageRC.com is where you find Courage, and you can go through their website to find Encourage. You might try watching the film Desire of the Everlasting Hills, a very fine movie about this very topic. And call back again. If there's another way we can support you, we'd love to have you call. Our number here is 888-318-7884. Our guest is Father Robert McTague. We're talking about sharing the truth effectively. In some cases, in this case, in this mom's case, when the whole world is trying to share falsity effectively. Doesn't it seem like that, Father? Like everything else is against this mom.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are lots of people with really bad ideas who are zealous to share. I mean, if only Christians had the same kind of zeal and generosity.
Indeed. Thank you, Anonymous Mom, for that call. I do hope we'll get to speak again. I'm going to go to San Antonio, Texas now. Lucy watching on Facebook Live. Lucy, thank you so much for your call. Our guest is Father Robert McTague. Go ahead with your question for Father McTague.
Yes, thank you, and God bless you both.
Thank you.
So I've just recently come to understand and know the truth behind the way that we as Catholics honor valid marriages, the way that we believe marriages are to be, validated through the Catholic Church. And so I have a lot of family members that are not married through the Catholic Church. And so now that I know this, I'm kind of like unsure how to start educating them in an effective way without sounding like, well, I didn't know it now. I didn't know it before, but now I know it now. So here's the truth. And, without being so abrasive. And they have some events coming up, like baby showers, that I'm not really sure if I can attend because of their invalid marriage, celebrating something like that. So,
Lucy, I thank you so much for the question. Because the music's playing and we have to do this hard break at the bottom of the hour, I'm going to ask you to hold on. If you can just hold on for 90 seconds, we'll be back with Father Robert McTeigue. We'll get an answer to your question. If you are listening at home and you'd like to call for help on communicating the truth effectively, 888-318-7884. Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and He desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of His will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Life can be tough,
especially during a pandemic.
Are you tired or exhausted from the pressures of the past year?
We'll discuss that Monday on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on most of these EWTN stations.
Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. A lot of wisdom in our guest this hour, Father Robert McTeigue, a Jesuit from the Maryland province of the Society of Jesus, a teacher of philosophy, and he's got a book out called Real Philosophy for Real People, Tools for Truthful Living. You can get that from Ignatius Press, and you can catch his show on the Station of the Cross and other places as well now. The Catholic Current. Father Robert McTeigue is our guest. We're talking about conveying the truth, sharing the truth effectively this hour. If there's someone in your life you're having trouble conveying the truth to or sharing the truth with in an effective way, you're very welcome to call 888-318-7884. Lucy is on the line, and Lucy's question, Father, has to do with being a Catholic and being invited to weddings outside the Catholic Church. I have to say, when I heard Lucy's question, I don't think I was listening effectively. I thought she was asking about Catholics who are getting married outside the church. Can you go to their wedding? But it seems to be a broader question about, can you go to weddings that are not Catholic?
Yes, I mean, if it's Catholics have an obligation to respect the form of sacramental marriage. So if I'm Catholic and I'm going to go marry Sally Lutheran and I don't get a dispensation from the local bishop, then that's going to cause scandal. I can't support that because as a Catholic, I know what the right thing to do is. But if Sally Lutheran is marrying Fred Lutheran and they're friends, we can share in their joy. We can also pray earnestly and fervently that eventually they'll receive the fullness of truth that Christ revealed to the one church he founded and come home to Rome. Okay. So I hope that that addresses the question.
What do you think, Lucy? Is that getting at what you were asking?
Sort of, yes. But the other part is that I already have family members that are married outside of the church, and they are Catholic. And so how do I effectively communicate to them, being Catholic, maybe they didn't know or maybe they neglected to understand that a valid Catholic marriage is through the church. And,
sure.
And
I don't know how we could. I'd broaden this out to how do we communicate about marriage in general. I mean, but
right. And we have to make a distinction between a valid marriage and a sacramental marriage. All right. So their marriage may be valid, but it needs to be what they call convalidated. It needs to be sacramentally. So you can contract a natural marriage, but the sacramental bond is something else. Again, rather than say, hey, here's some information that might confuse you, and then I want you to act accordingly, and I'll be disappointed with you eternally if you don't, that's not going to open a lot of doors. Okay. So you have to start with levels of trust. Say, how you doing in your marriage? Where are the graces? Where are the struggles? If you want to avail yourself to the fullness of God's grace, because living marriage is hard. If you want to live it to its heights and fullest, you're going to need sacramental grace. Let me tell you how to get it. Because as I tell couples preparing for marriage, a man's going to stand before God and man at the altar and say, I will love this woman so well that when people see how I love her, they're going to say, that must be how Christ loves his church. And the woman's going to say at the altar before God and man, I'm going to love that man so well that when people see how I love him, they're going to say, that must be how the church loves Christ. And our best day, that's impossible. It's only with God's grace that you can begin to live that. And you need the grace of the sacrament of marriage to be even better parents for your children. So talk about it in terms of the fullness of love rather than what's wrong with you? How could you not know that?
Thanks, Lucy. I hope that's helpful to you. Our number is 888-318-7884. Having trouble conveying the truth in an effective way. Our guest is Father Robert McTeigue, a philosopher, and here to help us communicate the truth effectively. Your calls are welcome. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. Something happened to. It seems to me that modern people have so many advantages, but there's a few disadvantages to being modern. And one of them is the sense of everything is democratic. Like, this is not a good view that somehow I get a say in what the truth is. The truth doesn't, see that the truth doesn't have a claim on me.
Truth is a matter of consensus, or truth is whatever is trending. At the moment. For example, several years ago, there were self-identified Catholic universities who put on a scandalous, I won't mention the name here, but I'm sure you know what I'm referring to, a scandalous feminist play. And it was a badge of honor that it was so transgressive, daring. But now it's a sign of contradiction to put on that play because it suggests that only people with girl parts can be women. Okay. So at one point is look at us, we're pro-feminist because we've got this scandalous play and it's going to upset the crusty old Catholics. Shh.
Yes.
But now if you say, I've got a great idea, let's put on this play. Oh my goodness, no, because it suggests that only people with girl parts are women. Right? When I would have students point out the window and call it the real world, I say, no, that's the realm of common experience. What we're doing in my classroom about truth, beauty, goodness, virtue, that's the real world. well, Father, drawing upon their life experience, you have your reality, I have mine, who's to say? And I said, well, wait a minute, why is it in your reality and my reality we fall out of the window at the same rate of speed? Why did you pick a reality where too much beer and chocolate makes you fat and stupid? And why did you ever pick a reality where the cutoff for an A in my class is a 95? That's poor planning on your part, isn't it?
You need a better reality. First of all, a 95, come on, this is America.
That's
that
right.
is too high. We do not have those.
You got to be in it to win it. I'm a Jesuit, no half measures. We succeed or we die trying.
888-318-7884, our number, 888-318-7884. So part of communicating the truth effectively now is convincing people that, and I like the way that you do it, because there is an absurdity to this democratization of the truth, as if we could just make it up as we go along. It is absurd. And so you take it to its absurd conclusion in a way.
Right.
Like, why did you pick...
I identify as wealthy. I'll see if that does me any good when I go to Costco.
Exactly.
I identify as the heir of Bill Gates. Hey, I identify as 6'8" and competent in basketball. Hire me, you hater. No, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. And someone needs to say, not only does the emperor have no clothes, the empire has no tailor. This idea of one illusion after another, after another, after another. Remember when, a couple months ago, the phrase sexual preference was okay until Amy Coney Barrett said it?
Oh, yeah, I know.
And then literally overnight, dictionary.com or Webster's, one of those online dictionaries, changed the definition, so now it's hate speech.
Yes.
It's nonsense. It's trite to say it's Orwellian, but it really is Orwellian. The beginning of wisdom, Confucius said, is to call things by their true names, just like God told Adam to do. Truth liberates. It doesn't constrain.
Yes, that's right. But there's a massive resistance to it, maybe rooted in selfishness to some degree. I mean, it's fun to be able to say what's right and wrong for yourself and not have to listen to anybody else, but also rooted in a kind of hopelessness, it seems to me, that there is no one out there who cares about me or made any rules or is going to vindicate me in the end.
Right, that there's no one calling me to anything higher and no one aiding me to attain anything higher. So ultimately, it's a kind of a conspiracy. Say, hey, I have I have horrible, shameful things that I like. You have horrible, shameful things that you like. Let's agree to set up a society where no one is held accountable and no one has to feel bad for their bad choices. Well, that doesn't work either. I mean, there is a positive cultural influence that causes people to aspire. That's why we also need good example. In Aristotle's rhetoric, an essential element of persuasion was the credibility of the speaker or the author. I could write a really resounding pro-life speech, and if you had Hillary Clinton read it, who would believe it? It's all true because I wrote it, but no one would believe it. So one of the things you have to do, you have to establish relationships with people so that they can hear the hard truth from you.
Again, the number 888-318-7884. We go now to Erie, Pennsylvania. Francis in Erie, Pennsylvania. You are next. Thank you so much for your call. Go ahead with your question for Father.
Yes, good evening, Father. Blessings upon you. Deacon Francis, on your non-negotiable issue, I had a son who was out of town and going to college. My brother-in-law happened to call me because my brother-in-law lived down there. He was telling me that my son moved in with his girlfriend. So I was kind of hurt, my wife and I. So we waited, and finally he called because he always called. And I told him, I said, gee, I'm kind of disappointed what I heard. And he said, I didn't know how to tell you, Dad, I moved in with her. I said, honey, this is a moral issue. I said, do you love this girl? He said, certainly. I said, then why degrade her this way? You have to leave this situation. And he said to me, well, who made you God? I said, honey, I'm your father. I want God's blessing upon you. I don't want you to travel through life without his blessing. You weren't raised that way.
Right.
And he said, anyway, and I haven't heard from him for over 13 years.
Oh, Lord.
Francis,
I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. See, part of the tragedy of that is that we've relativized both theology and morality. Who made you God? If we could turn back the clock, I'd suggest to say, wow, what are you going to name the baby? Are you going to do Lamaze classes? Do you have a baby registry? And then there'll be hum. Oh, but we're careful. So what, you're doing the baby making thing, right? Yeah. Well, unless she had a hysterectomy or you've been castrated, there's a non-trivial chance no matter what you do, you're going to end up with a baby. I just want to know if you picked out names, you got a 401k plan, a college savings plan. Oh, we're not ready for that. Well, you're doing what brings it about. Help me understand that. Because talk about follow the science. I mean, this is rudimentary biology. You cannot talk your way around that. People talk glibly, theology, morality, it's all opinion. Well, let's start with bodies and how they work. What are you going to name the baby?
Francis, I hope that's helpful to you. I'm so sorry to hear about the 13-year break.
Oh my gosh,
and I'm sure many are praying for you and your son right now for a reunion. And the Lord can heal any breach. Let's pray that he does so.
The intercession of St. Monica. Yeah.
Amen. Amen, Father. Thank you. I have to take a break, however, and we will be right back with more calls for our guest, Father Robert McTeigue. We're talking about how to communicate the truth effectively. If there's someone you need some help sharing the truth effectively with, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Now there's a fast and easy way to get in touch with EWTN. The EWTN Everything number. Call 1-800-447-EWTN to get the latest information on programming, special events, pilgrimages, and more. Our EWTN Family Viewer Services representatives are ready to help you with whatever your needs may be. The EWTN Everything number. 1-800-447-EWTN. EWTN.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest is Father Robert McTeigue. Father's latest book is called Real Philosophy for Real People, Tools for Truthful Living. And our topic this hour is how to share the truth effectively. 888-318-7884 is our number, 888-318-7884. It's you put that word philosophy right on your book, and you don't seem ashamed of the word philosophy at all. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack out of the personal things we've been discussing, but because the word philosophy is abused in the mouths of many of those who follow what we might call scientism these days. Philosophy's dead. Why do we need philosophy? The way to know truth is science. How might you communicate effectively to people about the fact that actually science isn't going to answer all your questions, and you need other tools?
The fact that they say we don't need philosophy, we've got science, that's a philosophical statement, not a scientific statement. So, all right, let's start. Let's do that.
So what is philosophy then?
Well, from the roots, it's the love of wisdom. It is the way of coming to understand the proper names, order, and relations of things. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. I think Aristotle would say the disorganized life cannot be lived well. Philosophy is a way of coming to know the truth about reality, humanity, and morality, about beauty, about goodness, and having a frame of reference so that you can navigate your way to the fulfillment of human purposes for both individuals and communities.
That's a lot of work for philosophy to do. I suppose that's why there are philosophy departments in every university, because that's a heavy lift. So in your book, you make this a book for real people, real philosophy for real people. Why say real? I mean, what makes philosophy unreal?
Well,
what makes
I
it
grew
real?
up on the observation of my late great mentor, Dr. Paul Weiss, who said philosophers let theories get in the way of what they and everyone else know. When you get the invitation, come to Desperate State University, where Dr. Jones will talk about how everything is a figment of his imagination. Please RSVP so we can arrange for valet parking and have the lunch catered. John W. Sire tells a story of being at a faculty cocktail party where Dr. Smug in his tweed jacket has his cocktail in one hand. He's got his elbow up on the mantelpiece talking about how reality is an illusion. He said, all you do is go up to his ear and whisper, dude, your fly's open. If he looks, he's a fraud. All these people who are absolutely uncertain about reality know which number to dial if direct deposit doesn't come through on time.
Right, exactly. All of a sudden, if your money's involved, it's very real.
Right.
Reality is all of a sudden very real.
All of a sudden, who can say what's right and wrong until I take your wallet?
Yeah, now I know what's wrong.
Yeah.
Again, 888-318-7884, our number, 888-318-7884. But I'm thinking of Jesus and the parable of the prodigal son, and the father let the son walk away, and we know I think we know who the father is in that story. And then we have St. Paul turning certain people over to Satan so that they can be corrected and come back. And I wonder about our society sometimes, like, it actually seems like madness to me sometimes, like the things that are said on the TV news. I'm not talking about on crazy shows. I'm talking about like on the evening news, the things that are said.
Our top story tonight, and then
it's not real. It has no connection to reality. How far does this have to go before we start doing philosophy again? Before we start asking basic questions and allowing people to answer?
An analogy to addiction. No addict works towards getting sober until his addiction costs him something he doesn't want to give.
Yeah.
And I'm not inclined to quote Ayn Rand, but she did say you can avoid reality, but you can't avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. The book that I just finished, that I hope to send to the publisher by the end of the month, is called Christendom Lost and Found, Meditations for a Post-Christian Age. So, hey, since at least the French Revolution, 1789, we've been trying to organize our lives without Christ. We've racked up one hell of a body count. Can we rethink this, please?
Yes.
Please?
Right.
And see, let's turn, and I'm not talking about a nostalgic golden age. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about learning the lessons from the past so that we can have a better present and future in light of what Christ has always intended for his people. Because we're not doing a good job. We're really not. Think of all the unhappy people there are who are doing desperate things to get away from their pain. And then say, there's another way.
But there is a profound denial. Everybody knows the story of Walter Duranty winning the Pulitzer Prize at the New York Times for lying for Stalin about 5 million people murdered, starved to death. I mean, the New York Times, by the way, still has not given that Pulitzer Prize back. No. They still count it among their Pulitzer Prizes. So, I mean, it just seems like denial can go on for an awfully long time.
Well, in my book, I talk about McTague's axiom, which states most institutions would rather die than admit that anyone ever made a mistake.
Oh.
And then there's McTague's corollary. Most people haven't matured past the age of 15 and are still desperate to be invited to sit at the cool kids table at the high school cafeteria. So if you're teaching Orthodox Catholicism, you're not going to be invited to the Colbert Show.
No.
You're not going to be invited to The View. Bill Maher might arch his eyebrows and say something droll about you. And who could live like that? And so we roll over.
Right. Yes, we do. But there are wonderful examples of people who don't, and you feel so grateful for them when they don't.
Yes.
That they just say what the truth is. I know that. I'm going to go to a caller before I do any more talking because I've been talking too much. So let's go to Nancy. I don't have a location where you are, Nancy, but we're going to meet you where you're at, as Father says. We're going to meet you where you're at, Nancy. Go ahead with your question.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Happy to.
Father, I wanted to ask your advice about two situations I find myself in, and they're related to my daughter's Catholic high school, all-girls school, and this year they're beginning to embrace having transgender students. And so we find ourselves like in class, needing to use the opposite pronoun for a girl who believes that she identifies as a male. So that's one situation. And relatedly, now we're also beginning to look at colleges. And as we visit, we're trying to look at Catholic colleges. And the virtual visits have the admissions people have the screen with their name and the preferred pronoun parentheses. So right. I guess I would like to have a way to inquire or approach this, but it's as a mother.
The second question is easier to address. Go to the Cardinal Newman Society and get their catalog of reliable Catholic schools. Start there. Okay.
Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah.
Regarding what's taking place in the high school, look for the website and the work of Dr. Leonard Sachs, family physician and psychiatrist of many, many years who deals with gender dysphoria and so on. He's been a guest on my show, The Catholic Current, a number of times. I really need to have him on again. Look, this is a matter of justice. If you want to call yourself Napoleon, you can, but do not demand that I call you Napoleon. Do not demand that I act according to what I know to be true. In the climactic scene in 1984 with George Orwell, there's 4 lights, but you have to say there's 5 or else. This young lady with double X chromosomes can't possibly be male in any meaningful way. And I sin against the commandment not to lie if you insist that I call her something that she cannot possibly be. This poor child is confused. She's certainly in great pain. And you know what? She might be exploited. She might be exploited by an adult who should know better, or maybe she just fell under the sway of some really messed up social media. And it's wrong. It's not an act of Christian charity to participate in someone else's harmful delusion. We used to know that. Somehow we forgot it.
Nancy?
Yes.
What do you think?
Thank you. That definitely is very clear. I guess partly I'm struggling with my own personal responsibility to step into that, and with I have to admit, I'll be honest and say I'm a little fearful of doing that with the high school. I was thinking about calling the college that we were kind of interested in, saying, "Why are you doing that?"
It's too late. No, it's too late.
Explain to me. Okay.
No, it's too late. It's too late. If they're doing that, it's done. It's over. Mm-hmm. That school is gone off the list.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, thank you.
You are not going to get an institution that large and with that much money who's collecting federal dollars in the present circumstances and say, what were we thinking? This mom in the middle of nowhere changed our mind. Mm-hmm. No, it's too late.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And regarding the high school, do I have
regarding the high school, right. And, you might have to look at some other options. But look, if these people are A, maybe so well-intentioned, but B, so obtuse about what nature and revelation say about male and female, I wouldn't trust them to make an omelet without burning it, much less guiding my child. This is rudimentary things that 5-year-olds understand.
Until someone talks the 5-year-old out of it. Until someone cruelly talks the 5-year-old out of it. This is what I'm so impressed that Nancy didn't just call and scream into the phone, because that's what I feel like doing. So, seriously, God bless her for being so mature, and thank you, Nancy.
Bless you, Nancy.
Because you just want to say, how is it not child abuse to treat children this way? How is it not? Yes. How do you not see that? Teaching children a complete nonsense about basics of biology is not child abuse. Then
would you send her a fruit basket when she has her healthy breast surgically removed?
It's maddening. It's maddening that I'm impressed with both of you for not just screaming, because I am, as soon as this program is over, I'm going to get in my car and just scream for 40 minutes on the way home, because I can't take it anymore. There's some things that are true and some things that are false. Nancy knows it. Father knows it. How do we convince the people who are running everything? Father Robert McTague, I'm sorry that I ended as a madman.
We don't judge here. That's fine.
I think you do judge. You're
Yes,
a Jesuit. I think you do.
I judge very well. Yes.
Right. Nancy, everybody else, thanks for the call. Sorry there were callers that we didn't get to, but you know what? You all called in the last 10 minutes. What are we going to do? We can't get everybody on. Father Robert McTague's book is available from Ignatius Press. It's called Real Philosophy for Real People, Tools for Truthful Living. You can also find his show, The Catholic Current, on the Station of the Cross. Father Robert McTague, thank you so much.
God's peace. Keep each other in prayer.
Amen. God's peace. Jesus Christ is the light of the nations. I'm just going to hold on to that. We'll see you next time on Catholic Answers Live.